Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, I would like to talk about Blizzard and their new game coming out, Overwatch. Not so much about Overwatch, but more about the history of Blizzard and kind of my thoughts on some of the stuff that's been going on. I've started going to the gym. I got a gym membership. I've been exercising at home for a little while, but you really underestimate how much better it is to work out with weights. And so I was up there doing some cardio stuff with Alan, and on the television, they were advertising for Overwatch. And it's really blown me away exactly how much advertising there has been for Overwatch. It's completely ludicrous. There have been, basically ads on, Fox Sports. They have been spamming V on 4chan nonstop. And it's really, it's blatantly just marketing threads. They're there asking, are you going to buy Overwatch and stuff like that. The discussion has all been pretty vapid and mindless. What the general impression people are giving is that the game is fun, but probably it doesn't have a lot of long-lasting potential. There's not going to be a lot of custom. There's not going to be custom servers. There's not going to be any modding potential. It's probably going to be a fairly mediocre game. But this has gotten to be what I actually expect from Blizzard anymore, and the reason is because they've gotten to be, I think, more about marketing, and they're a very successful marketing company, but they're really not that good of a game development company anymore, and that's what I really want to talk about, is sort of about marketing and how Blizzard has developed. Now, Blizzard's been around for a good while. I remember, back when I was a kid, I guess I was about, 10, 12, I don't know, whatever, StarCraft came out. And I had a friend whose family was very conservative. They were very strict about things. And my friend was only allowed to play on the computer for 1 hour a day. And one of those games that he liked to play was StarCraft. So, we would come over and he had 2 computers, in this computer room. And you could play on the local area network. So he would set up a game and we would play StarCraft together when we were young. And I've been, an RTS junkie for quite a while. I really like my RTS games. I have a good time. And so StarCraft was, the first one of those games that I ever gave a shot. I also owned Warcraft 2. And I played Warcraft 1, but, can't really recall anything too memorable about it. Was never really terribly good at those games. When you play them when you're young, those are games that require a ton of micromanagement. You have to understand what you're doing. They're difficult to get into. But Warcraft 3 is when I eventually started to get really into a Warcraft game. I was old enough when that came out that I was able to understand it and actually get good at it. Play competitively. I did okay. I got reasonably far in the ladders, tried a few tournaments, did okay in the tournaments, didn't explode to the top or anything like that, but was a fairly solid player. The game was balanced and it was fun, and the story, while it was that sort of fantasy, I'm turning evil and now I get the sword of evil and this is my magic sword. It was all fine. You could play through the campaign without tearing your own eyes out. And really the only reason I quit playing Warcraft 3 was because eventually I just got sick of the Blade Walker, the Blade Master, the Windwalking Blade Master, for the orcs. Because they had this character who could turn invisible, and he could run into your base, and he could kill your workers, and then he'd turn invisible, and he'd run off, and he'd kill your workers again. And you didn't get the ability to see invisible units till, the middle tier. You had to have, usually, with a few exceptions, you had to have, a tier 2 unit to actually see, any kind of invisible unit. So this stupid orc could just come in and out of your base at his will, and he would just kill all your workers. And this was such an effective strategy that it was insanely rare to ever play an orc player who didn't immediately go for the windwalking orc and stab all your guys to death. And I hated that. It was just so frustrating. It was such a frustrating kind of gameplay. I don't know, that one thing is what made me really just eventually give up on the game. I liked everything else about it, but yeah, the Blade Master, very frustrating, very annoying. So anyway, though, I had a lot of fond opinions of the game. A lot of my friends really loved Diablo 2. I remember going to hang out with my friends, and if there was too many of us to be playing the N64 or whatever all together, then someone would get on Diablo 2, and that lasted for years. People played that game for ages, and a lot of people have really fond memories of Diablo. I had friends that just loved Diablo to death. I never really played it personally, but Blizzard just developed this stellar reputation. One of the things that people used to say was, Blizzard games, when they get released, they're released when they're done. When these are good, solid games. And that's not entirely true. I mean, for example, StarCraft had some trouble with, air units would clump up and they would be unstoppable. So they had to introduce, units in the Brood War expansion that would be able to kill clumped up air units. stuff like that. There were, you know, always improvements to be made with the games, but they had a very solid core. They were very well designed, very trustworthy brand, Blizzard. Like you could buy a Blizzard game and it would be good. And, you know, then they had World of Warcraft, and that took off because, understandably, like, Blizzard was behind it. They were a fantastic brand, fantastic developers. You know, everything that they put out was really good. So, when StarCraft 2 rolled around, I remember getting really excited for it. And this was actually after they had merged with Activision. And this is the thing, is as far as I'm concerned, Blizzard is dead. Like, Blizzard is not really a brand anymore. What they use now is they're basically Activision, but Activision is using the Blizzard brand as a sort of facade to sell games that really aren't very good. Like, I think that they know that if they were using a different intellectual property or a different brand name, that most of the stuff they're selling really wouldn't go over very well. I mean, we're talking like, not like lead balloons, but like they may not make back their investment because they're really not very good games. So StarCraft 2 came out, and me being like really into RTS games, I was excited for it, and I bought it like when it launched. I was like, yeah, Wings of Liberty, and I started playing it, and I got into it for a while. I got just to about Diamond League. Was starting to play like Diamond League players, and it was like giving me the promotional stuff, like you know, you'll play a couple games, and we'll promote you to Diamond League. But around as I started to get into that was the highest league at the time, Diamond League, I started to realize that being in the highest league meant memorizing all the timing pushes, because what the game had done is instead of building around a strong core, they built around marketability. And this is the theme now. This is the theme with Blizzard that I've been noticing consistently. And this is what I'm going to try to keep coming back to as well as I can. Now, on a gameplay level, like what they'd actually gotten into was tactics. Like you have these units, and like Unit A counters Unit B. So if somebody builds like Unit B, you know, if they build a you know, I don't know. Let's just say, for anyone who's not familiar with the games, they'll say you build Unit A and it's a rabbit, and then Unit B is a wolf, and so you know your opponents are building Unit A, and so you build Unit B, wolf, and then you know, so like later on you have to build Unit C, which is like a bear trap. And the bear trap catches the wolf. It kills the wolf. I don't know. It's maybe a little overkill with the bear trap. Yeah, whatever. So anyway, so you build a bear trap, and so you just kind of go forward, and that's the whole game. But the game is focused around responding to what your opponent built, and you know, so you build a counter to whatever they build. They build a counter to what you build a counter to whatever they build. And the game is really more about scouting and making sure you know what your opponent is building, because if at some point you lose track of what they're building and they surprise you, then you'll lose, because they'll come in and they'll just sweep you with the counter to your composition. So it became kind of more about a tactical game, like where you're focused on the tactics of watching your opponent and then choosing the counter to his build, rather than a strategic game, you know, where strategy would be focused more on like, you know, I'm directing a pincer attack here, and I'm trying to set up this position, and if I can get artillery up on this ridge, I can fire down into his base. And like Supreme Commander, for example, is a game that I really like that focuses a lot more on strategy, because everything really is more about, like, you apply pressure here, you know, you build a attack missile back here, you know, you keep an eye on this, you make sure that they're not building anything, like you launch a bomber, take out their attack missile defenses if they have some, and maybe then you can launch your missiles in there, kill, like, some of their key facilities or whatever. Like, there's a lot more strategy and planning. It's about how you direct your troops and where you apply that pressure. Like, where do you build your defenses, this and that. It's not about picking the counter to your opponent's composition. It's about knowing how to manage all of your resources, everything that you've got at your disposal, to go ahead and move forward and secure more resources. And these games are very hard. Like they're not easy to get into. And the thing is, I think that Activision was aware that StarCraft in general has a high skill ceiling and also kind of a high skill floor. Because the thing about these games is that if you get an advantage in the first minute of the game, then that has a compounding effect. Like, you get to 10 minutes in, and if you've had an advantage for that full 10 minutes, then you are, like, you're ahead. You're ahead much further than your opponent, because you're teching up faster, you're expanding faster, you're getting more units. You know, that small advantage builds up over time. So a player who's a little bit better will do significantly better in the long run. And you see this, like if you watch like two players and one's got more skill, like the more challenging the game is, the more options the game gives you, the more complex the game, you find that the faster, like, it escalates. Like, if somebody gets a little bit better, and they, you know, you just go from like a mediocre player to a good player, The good player is just miles and miles ahead of the mediocre player. The mediocre player has no idea what's going on. Probably they lost the game in the first 5 minutes because they did something wrong. They didn't go out and they didn't secure that one position that they should have known they needed it, but they didn't have enough experience to realize they need it yet. So they're harder games. They're less accessible, and I find a lot of people, although they may enjoy them, it's rare to really see people get into them and get really good and be really competitive. And this is my big lament with really being into these games, is that I will actually sit there and I'll like look up what other people are doing, and I'll watch replays, and I'll practice strategies, and I'll get really good at these games, and then just kind of wipe the board, and then it's like, I don't even know how you did that. It's like, well, I get really into this stuff. So strategy games. I understand wanting to casualize them a lot, and that's what Blizzard went for. But again, I'm going to come back to the spectacle thing. What they were going for, I think, is because Activision, I am convinced that basically most of their budget goes to advertising, and only some of the budget really goes to game development. Because as I was watching them build, there were a lot of red flags, and were I more cynical at the time, I probably wouldn't have bought StarCraft 2 as soon as it came out. Instead, I let them burn me, and I haven't forgotten and I haven't forgiven them. But I was watching them, and they were showing all these units, and so they had like the Colossus come out, and it had these lasers, and it was all very, very flashy, and just like, oh, look at these lasers melting the enemy army, just evaporating everyone. And I was like, man, like those do a lot of damage for the fact that they're just one unit. Like they just go out there and they just melt all those Marines. Like that's crazy. How are they gonna balance that? And then they had like the mothership, and they were like, yeah, it just launches a weapon that sucks everything into a black hole and it dies. And it's like, oh, phew. That also sounds really difficult to balance. Like it just kills everything in a radius? Like that's a little over the top. And the game kept getting closer and closer to completion, and I wasn't seeing a lot of evidence of how exactly they were going to balance all this stuff. I was seeing lots of flash and lots of lots of explosions, lots of stuff that you could put on a commercial and be like, look at all this, boom, man, whoa, that was pretty cool, right? Yeah, cool, that's cool. You want to buy this game? That's going to be cool. And I also, another red flag was I was also not seeing that they were finishing the Zerg race at all. Like they'd had a couple of units listed in the Zerg faction, but like it didn't appear that they'd actually gotten around to looking at the Zerg or really doing anything sincere with them. So then the YouTubers started coming out, and the YouTubers were doing this terrible, terrible damage thing. And that's actually one of the ways that I figured out that basically a lot of the pre-YouTube, the pre-launch hype that was being built up on YouTube, that was actually being coordinated by marketing teams. Because that terrible, terrible damage thing was an in-joke. It was actually established in the game, like one of the characters mentioned it, and the YouTubers were all saying it, and like it was just like somebody did a compilation video where they were it was like they were trying to start a meme or something like that, and so like in retrospect I kind of look at that and it's like, well, of course that was right around when people were starting to become aware that YouTubers were being paid by large companies to hawk their games and stuff like that, and say like, yeah, this is a fantastic game, this is a lot of fun. And I can't remember, like I said, I was actually hired by a company to do something similar to that, but it fell through because my computer at the time was not strong enough to show off the graphical capabilities. It was a little weird. I mean, like they weren't super strict about it. They were just like, yeah, like don't show off any glitches, like any of the game's shortcomings. Please don't show those off. And I was just like, oh, okay. I made like a little comedy thing about their game. Like it was kind of silly, but their game tanked. The game that tried to hire me to do stuff, their game tanked because it really wasn't a very good game. And I could kind of tell that while I was playing it, but they were promising us at the time that, well, this is only the alpha. Like, it's only the alpha. Like, we're gonna add so much, so much before release. And I was like, okay, well, you'll need to add a lot, but okay. So yeah, they just wanted us to advertise. That was all they wanted to do. So Blizzard, though, they hire YouTubers to advertise. And they've done the same thing with Overwatch. They do this, I think, with a lot of their games now. And so those people who are playing those games ahead of time, they may or may not have contracts preventing them from saying disparaging things about the game or showing any of its shortcomings. It's hard to say. Like I say, mine wasn't terribly strict, but if they have, like, for example, a non-disclosure clause in their contracts, they may just kind of cooperate with it, and you wouldn't really learn anything about their games. But anyway, though, StarCraft 2, it released, and yeah, it was just an obscene letdown as far as RTS games go. Like, it was so shallow, and so, in the end, it just got to be boring. Like, I just got tired of timing pushes. I got tired of worrying about these templates, because it was like, oh, well, at 4 minutes, like, he'll push with this if he's built this thing. Like, you had to just look. You're like, oh, he's doing a double gas thing, so that means that he's building these, which means that I need to build these ahead of time. And that was what the game became about, is it wasn't really about strategy and having the best grasp of, directing your resources. It was about prediction, and like, you still had to hold your ground, but really, as long as you were predicting your opponent's builds, they were in the palm of your hand. And I just I hated that. And the Zerg 2 had so many patches in their design. Like, there were just like lots of little holes. Like, for example, they really had no mobile anti-air that was ground-based. Like, there was some sky-based anti-air, but it was based on like taking down the Colossus, and that was basically all it was good for. There was just like one unit that you would build your anti-air for, and it wasn't even an air unit. It was a ground unit that could be hit from the air. It was weird. So just lots of weird mistakes. Like, you could tell that Blizzard's dev team was getting directions from the marketing team, and the marketing team was saying, like, look, we need to make an esport, and this esport needs to appeal to the people who are watching. So we need like lasers, we need explosions, like stuff needs to be dying left and right all the time. Like, we need whole armies to be wiped out and then rebuilt and then wiped out again. So they have all these macro mechanics where you get your armies completely wiped out, but you get these, like these reactor cores, for example. So it makes it to where you can produce twice as many units at a time. Or you get like the larva inject, which makes it to where you can produce like, you just remax your army. Everything dies, you remax your army, you go out, everything dies again. Sort of. I mean, like, it's not exactly how the game plays out, but you can tell that's what they were going for, is they wanted, chaos, explosions, death, spectacle. And then you would remax your army and then go back to spectacle again. They just wanted like these waves of spectacle, and they thought that would make a good esports sort of deal. And the thing is that really wasn't what made StarCraft's Brood War big in the first place. What made Brood War big was the fact that there was a certain amount of skill that went into that game. Like, people were doing lots of interesting things to get ahead, and there were still templates. Like, there were still build orders that people went for, like certain types of rushes and things like that. But on a higher level, though, I mean, like, people wouldn't get fooled by those like early rushes and things like that. They would kind of know how to deal with them, so they wouldn't get wiped out with them. They might get damaged by them, but they wouldn't lose. And so they took advantage of all the little mechanics and all these other things. And it was hard to get into because the user interface was not nearly as friendly. Like, you can only select 12 units at a time, and so you had to sort of divide your stuff up into groups and move them around, within these like 12 these small sizes. So it took a lot of energy, took a lot of effort. And StarCraft 2, just significantly less effort to be good at that game. Significantly less thinking, just a much easier game, a lot more spectacle, in my opinion, probably very marketer friendly. And the other thing that happened, though, is that as they were advertising that game, they were showing off the dev builds of these things, like the mothership that would suck in all these black holes, and the Colossus that was like, way too strong, and the siege tank that was doing way too much splash damage. They were showing off all these great big bombastic things, which got nerfed into the dirt on launch because they were not easy to balance. They were broken, They were spectacular and they looked interesting, but they were broken because you can't just have a kill all units in radius button. They changed it to a temporarily free, like they temporarily remove these units, but then put them back later. That was the trick that they eventually did. And yeah, so they kind of turned around, and like the stuff they were advertising, the stuff they were promising, the hype they built, it all sort of fell through. And then I watched as throughout the game's lifespan, Wings of Liberty, I kept seeing like posts from people on the forums, like the blue posts from the game staff, saying like, yeah, we're gonna make changes. Like, we're listening to you guys. We understand that you don't like this sort of, like you don't like certain aspects of the gameplay, and we're gonna make changes. We're gonna make things better. And one thing that was actually also really terrible about the game, but maybe less relevant because not everyone cared about the story, but the writing was like terrible. Like, I would expect, like, it was writing so bad that I would be ashamed to see it on the back of a Fruit Loops box. Like, whatever they're doing with the writing at Blizzard these days, like, man, anybody could do it. Like, I guarantee just about anybody could go in and write for Blizzard. Because they're not really writing a very cohesive, like, intelligent... You know, none of it makes sense anymore. It's all just tropes. You know, it's like, this is a trope, and that's a trope, and this is a trope. And I suspect that, again, we're coming back to marketing. Where again the marketers kind of looked at the whole idea and they're like, well, what do people relate to? Like, what can we sell? Like, what are we gonna do? Like, we're gonna say like Love Struck Cowboy does this or that. And actually they had a love story in StarCraft 2, and this is really weird because there weren't really any love stories in StarCraft 1. There was maybe a bit of a thing. There was a bit of flirting between a character named Kerrigan and a character named Jim. And what they did is they came back and they hyped this up to an absurd degree. To where like Kerrigan and Jim's love was supposed to be like the center of the story. And this is marketing 101 type of thing. This is like, oh, do we want to get more female players in the game? Do we want to get more female interest? Well, then we have a love story because that expands the demographic and more women will come to this product. So they were taking movie logic, because that's what they do in movies. They had a love scene to get more female viewers, and they were applying it to the game. And so they had this love scene, and if you'd played the previous games, like 12 years prior to when StarCraft 2 came out, this love stuff didn't really make a lot of sense, but they just added it in, you know, like you knew the marketing teams had said that, yeah, this will bring people in. So they just sort of did it. They just created a love scene, you know, for the sake of doing it. And then the expansion came out. And people were watching the expansion, and I remember one thing that was funny, because I mentioned the story being really bad, is somebody leaked a build of one of the final cutscenes for the game, where like Kerrigan storms in and she fights Manx, and then they have this like dramatic speech, and it was just so cringeworthy. Like, it was so terrible, and a lot of people responded to it, and they were like, "This is awful. Like, Blizzard, please, like, tell us this is not how you're gonna release the game. Like, this can't be your plan." And then Blizzard was like, no, of course that's not, that's not going to be what the final cutscene looks like. This is a fake. And then Heart of the Swarm came out, and it was the leak was real. Like, that was actually the cutscene. It was terrible, and they changed nothing about it. Essentially nothing about it. They made like a few small tweaks, but it was that cutscene. It was that terrible dialogue. Like, the voice acting was awful. That didn't make any sense. The setup was stupid. It was all stupid. The whole story was stupid. Like I say, you could get more sucked into a Fruit Loops box. Like, there's just something about, I think that when you design with marketing first, and then you just tell everyone in the writing staff, like, this is what you're going to do. Like, you really, like, I'm not even sure, Chris Metzen is the lead writer. I'm not even sure if I can blame Chris Metzen for sure. Because when somebody comes down and they tell you, like, these are the tropes you're going to use, and these have to be the elements in the story, and you have to have this love angle, like, it ties your hands up so badly. Because you're just looking at all these things and you're like, none of these pieces fit together. And the people who are in charge don't really care. So, I don't know. I guess I'll just write a story about, all these pieces fitting together in whatever, obtuse way that I can think to fit them together in. And that was StarCraft 2 in a nutshell. Just the whole story was just a bunch of really obtuse, non-fitting pieces being forced together and then super glued into place and just being like, yeah, this is not a stable structure, but we're building on it, and it's done. Game is done. So yeah, but Heart of the Swarm came out though, and none of the gameplay was improved. Nothing was changed. They added more units, they added a little bit more fluff, and it was all just flash and glitz, and there was no substance. They didn't actually improve anything about the game. And that's when it occurred to me that they are probably way understaffing their development team. Because there was so much that needed to be changed about Wings of Liberty. And that expansion was their opportunity to change it. And they didn't do anything. They really, honestly, Heroes of the Swarm, they had a campaign, and that was about it. That was pretty much the only meaningful change. That was the only meaningful thing about it. And the campaign was awful. The campaign was stupid. The story was stupid. And granted, the stuff that they released and the changes they did make had an impact on the game, but it didn't change the core of the game. It didn't make it go from a tactical game to a strategy game. It left it basically same deal, but it upset the tactics. That's all it really did, is it just added new units and that upset the tactical flow of the game. But once people learned the tactical flow again, they went right back into stale metas, and the metas kind of rotated around, but it was all just the same, you know, stale templates, builds, things like that. And of course, before that as well, they had Diablo 3 that came out. Diablo 3, as you may recall, was a massive disappointment for so many fans. But it was a popular IP that a lot of people were looking forward to. So again, they sold this game to a bunch of people. Everybody was excited about it. And that was one that people were mad about because, again, you could see that the marketing teams had gotten involved, and they'd set up these cutscenes to make it look like this was gameplay. And actually, Activision has gotten in trouble for this before. Activision, more than once, has designed cutscenes to look like it's gameplay. But when you actually buy the game and you play it, you find that you cannot do the stuff you saw in the commercials. Like, it is impossible. It's misleading advertising, and the games really don't play that way. Obviously, with Overwatch, I don't think you're going to get into that. I mean, like, if you played the beta, then what you saw was what you get. But here's what I think is going to happen with Overwatch. I think that what you've seen in the beta of Overwatch, if you've looked at that or been keeping up with the game, I think that's all you're going to get. Because I believe that probably just like StarCraft 2 and just like Diablo 3, they're going to understaff their development teams. And when they run into balance issues, or when it comes to designing new maps or new characters or things like that, they're not going to have enough resources assigned to it. What they're doing is they're spending all their money on advertising. They're spending their money on being on being on Fox Sports, on being on television, on being on V, on having all these YouTube celebrities talking about their game. It's all just marketing, 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 and I don't think that there's going to be any real improvements to Overwatch. So I mean, like, if you're playing Overwatch, and there are a lot of things I don't like about it. Like, I really dislike the art direction. I feel like they don't have a theme. I feel like there's nothing cohesive about the game. It doesn't look like there's very much depth. Like, the writing is terrible, but that's standard fare for Blizzard anymore. It all just feels like marketing and hype and flash. And again, actually, sticking to that theme of marketing and hype and flash, is if you look at the way they've designed the game, it's all based on abilities and ultimates and things like that. And ultimates are basically like, you play the game for a while, your ultimate power charges up, and then you use it. And it's this big flashy, like, oh, here's a bomb, you know? And so this bomb comes out, it blows up, and it's like, oh, look at the bomb, you know, man, look at the bomb, look at that, look at the special power that you cast, bomb, boom. And then the marketers come in and they show this, and all their, you know, they can talk about this and be like, yeah, look at all this, like, you know, you just push the Q button and kill the entire enemy team. Like, that's all it is. That's all it takes. Like, that's the maximum level of skill. You push the Q button, you kill everybody on screen. Yeah, that's Overwatch in a nutshell. Like, you know, just flash. It's glitz. It's glam. It's not real substance. Like, it's not really very good. It's not very exciting gameplay. There's not a lot of depth there. There's not a lot of skill. Like, you know, over the long run, I don't think that people... You know, like, I know people who have put thousands of hours into TF2, and I'm not really seeing that people are going to put thousands of hours into Overwatch. Some people may. You know, you always get those diehard fans. But I really just don't... Like, I don't see where there's a high skill ceiling for you to really want to invest that much time into the game. Like, I'm pretty sure that, like, a 12-year-old can show up and insta-kill you with an ultimate just as well as anybody else can, so... you know, like, the pro and the 12-year-old levels are not going to be too far separated from each other. You know, somewhat. But the 12-year-old is always going to get... The 12-year-old is always going to get their kicks in. And I'm sure that that's what Blizzard wants, because they want the 12-year-olds to come in. They want the 12-year-olds' money. But another thing, though, that I think they're doing is they know, because they're charging $40 for the game, or $60, I think, if you want some extra skins or something like that. They're advertising the expensive game first, but there's a $40 version if you haven't seen it. They're advertising the heck out of this game because they're charging $40 for it. And the thing is that all their competitors are free to play. So essentially, they're charging you $40 for a very mediocre game that's based mostly on being flashy and pretty. And they know that if they don't get a player base, like, on launch, the game will die. Like, it'll just be dead. So, like, you'll get in there and it'll be a ghost town. You know, it'll take forever for you to set up a game, and you won't be able to play. And I've seen some multiplayer games that actually suffered that. Like, there was this game that I kind of like called Interstellar. And it had some problems, it had some glitches, but it was a pay-to-play game. It was like $15 to buy it. And this pretty much killed its user base at the outset because, you know, they didn't have a big advertising budget. They couldn't draw people in. And so nobody was paying to buy it. I got it while it was on sale for like $2. And it was a fun game. And if it were free, it might have had a pretty solid player base, but they hadn't really built their model around being free. So games, I've seen them die as a result of being pay-to-play when they really should be free-to-play. And Overwatch is one of those games that should be free-to-play, but they're making it pay-to-play because they're banking on being the Blizzard brand. Even though Blizzard is actually dead, who they are is Activision. It's the Activision brand. So if you've ever been burned by Activision, then prepare to get burned by Activision again, I guess, if you're buying from Blizzard. And they're just advertising like mad because they don't want to die on launch. They probably won't. Given how much I've seen this game talked about, I would be surprised if they don't wind up being a financial success. I will also be surprised if they become an esport. Like, if anyone honestly takes the game seriously over, past a couple of months, I will be a little bit shocked. I wouldn't know what the deal would be. I would assume that would have to be Blizzard probably injecting cash and advertising into it past the game's launch. I don't know how much they've done that with games previously. I don't feel like they have a whole lot. I believe that Heroes of the Swarm, is being played, for example, but it's kind of, not talked about very much anymore. I almost hear nothing about their Heroes of the Swarm game. Or Heroes of the Storm. Heroes of the Storm. This is their attempt to compete with Dota and League of Legends. And so people play Dota and League of Legends, but you almost never hear people talking about Heroes of the Storm. On occasion people play it, but it's nowhere near as big as League or Dota, and it's probably never ever going to be as big as League or Dota because it's far more shallow, it's way more casual. The characters have all kind of been ruined by really bad writing, which is one thing that I think is funny about this IP game they're playing, this little shell game with we're Blizzard, we're still Blizzard, and this is our intellectual property, this is still StarCraft, this is still Diablo, they're doing that, and as they ruin their intellectual properties, it's funny to me that then they turn around and they release Heroes of the Storm. They're play as your favorite character, that guy we ruined. Remember when Jim Raynor was cool and now he's not? Do you want to play as the not cool version that we've made really lame and super lovesick and just never shuts up? He's drunk all the time. That Jim Raynor, do you want to play him? It's no. It's almost kind of heartbreaking actually. There's a young guy who wanted me to play Heroes of the Storm who comes to our streams, and he's just I don't know. No, I don't want to play as those old characters. It just breaks my heart. I was 12, when I played StarCraft. This is it's like watching my childhood die. It's like I'm getting old, and the world's getting to be dim and cynical, and I just can't, I can't enjoy Heroes of the Storm. There's nothing good about it. It's man. It's like if Winnie the Pooh were bought by some company and then they gave him a facelift to make him cool for the kids. It was like when they tried to make Bugs Bunny extreme because they thought that's what the kids would like, and it was just no. Don't do that. Just let Bugs Bunny die. Don't facelift characters and make them terrible just to sell them to a new generation. The same thing. It's there's I was the kid that was playing StarCraft. I wasn't in the pro scene, but that was I was 12 when I played it. Now it's terrible. Now Jim Raynor is some totally different person that I hate. So yes, I have an incredibly negative opinion of Blizzard. I feel like they are completely about marketing anymore. I don't think that they really care about the gameplay. I think that with Overwatch, you're going to find that most of what's going on there is just hype. I don't think that there's going to be much solid game stuff going on. I don't know that people will be tremendously disappointed if they buy the game. I don't know that they're really going to get $40 worth of enjoyment out of the thing. I mean, not everybody, certainly. Some people will, but I think that a fair number of people maybe will be screwing themselves if they buy the game. And I don't know. And I personally, like I say, I kind of dislike Blizzard these days. They killed a lot of my old favorite characters, tricked me with a game that I didn't really want. That happens. Every company sets out to do that, but I don't know. Overwatch been everywhere, and I'm starting to hate it. I'm starting to hate how much I see Overwatch, which is why I made this video. There were 20 threads on V when the beta launched, and I can't tell how many people on there were marketers working for Blizzard and how many people were actually fans. It's so hard to tell, Because, like I say, like when they're asking things like, so are you going to pre-order the game? So are you going to buy the game? Like, oh boy, this game is better than Team Fortress. And it's like, it's not. It's not better than Team Fortress. And like, why do you care if I'm going to buy the game? I don't know, just getting sick of it. Developing a very large amount of contempt for this. And I freaking learning to hate Activision all over again. But I don't know. I know it's got some fans. I know at least one guy who's like a diehard Blizzard fanboy, and he still believes that Blizzard is a real company. I think he's fooling himself, but whatever. You can't kill joy. If it brings you joy, it brings you joy. But for me, I'll never forget. I'll never forget. You ruined my childhood, Blizzard. I'll never buy another one of your games. I don't know who's good anymore, honestly. Like, we're in kind of a dark time for Blizzard. I guess, I don't know. There's still a couple of companies that are out there who are doing okay. But, we're in sort of a weird time for game development. A lot of old brands going downhill. Final Fantasy going downhill. Whatever, I don't know, I'm gonna start listening. Whatever the case. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Blizzard, Overwatch, their advertising, fantastic marketing company. Like, I have to hand them that. They're doing really great with all the marketing. Unfortunately, they're just a really boring game company, in my opinion. Not very good games, really great marketing. That's my take on Blizzard these days. So, thanks for joining me, everybody. I will catch you all next time.